Consisting of 7 totally dramatic seasons, Total Drama, created by Fresh TV, first aired on Teletoon in Canada on July 8, 2007, and on Cartoon Network in the US on June 5, 2008. Created as a parody of shows like Survivor, Total Drama Island, the show's first season, stood out among other cartoons on television at the time. The show was a cartoon for kids, but still contained jokes and plot lines for its older audience. In 2021, a YouTube video by Blue Productions was created by the name of Total Drama Reunion. It was a fan-made epilogue to the show with different voice actors and a lower budget. When the video released, much of Total Drama's fandom watched it and got hype for the continuation of it promised by its creator. However, Blue was told to shut down by Fresh TV as they owned the characters. Although I am not someone who truly loved Total Drama Reunion, I did love the idea of it. The darker but still in-character premise of it that also wrapped up the stories of the Total Drama community's favorite characters, except for Ava. Having said that, I have many thoughts and feelings I would now like to share in this video essay of sorts. So here goes. I now present to you a totally dramatic rant about Total Drama. I am someone who has watched Total Drama for all their life. Ever since I can remember, it's always just been on TV. And even though I only understood Owen's fart jokes when I was younger, it has always been one of my favorite shows. Having said that, there have been long periods of time where I stopped watching the show altogether. But recently I did a Total Drama deep dive and watched every season all the way through. I'll share my thoughts on that in a different video. As I watched the show, I realized it was getting worse over time, not necessarily because it strayed from its original format. It held pretty true beyond Ridonkulous Race and Total Drama Rama, but because with the exception of a few characters, the casts just didn't hit the same. The show up until the 4th season, Revenge of the Island, was always about the same group of characters: Ezekiel, Noah, Justin, Katie, Sadie, Tyler, Cody, Beth, Courtney, Harold, Ava, Trent, Bridget, Lindsay, DJ, Izzy, Jeff, Lashana, Duncan, Heather, Gwen, and Owen as the contestants, with Chris McLean as the host, and Chef Hatchet as his intimidating sidekick. Eventually, the show also introduced 2 well-loved and hated characters in Sierra and Alejandro. The point is, the show wasn't ever really just a parody of Survivor. It was about the relationships between the characters, which is what kept a lot of people watching. As soon as they changed casts, fans began to dwindle, and the show became less and less well-liked and more hated on. When 2 more seasons were announced, not a lot of people were surprised by the fact the cast would be yet another new one, but not a lot of people were super excited either. Or at least not as excited as if they had gotten even just one more episode with the original cast. This is why Total Drama Reunion got so much love from the fan base. It was about the actual original focus of the show. Obviously, Total Drama was created as a kids show, and as far as cartoons go, it is rare they get a real ending. But as demonstrated by the reaction to Reunion, that is what the fans want. So although the new seasons aren't going to give our favorite characters an ending, I got inspired and started thinking about an alternate season idea, somewhat based on Reunion, that gives our favorite characters an ending. I should mention, this is only a rough concept, so many of the ideas this video contains won't be perfect. If you have any ideas you'd want to share, drop them in the comments. I'd love to read them. To preface my ideas for this ending, or final season if you will, I will share with you some of my thoughts about the OG show and Reunion, as my ending is partly inspired by both of those. The original show is a great show and an enjoyable watch all the way through, if you're completely new to the show and you watch the seasons in the following order: Pakato Island, Revenge of the Island, Ridonkulous Race, Total Drama Island, Total Drama Action, Total Drama World Tour, Total Drama All-Stars. If you don't watch them in that order, or aren't new to the show, you realize that the show isn't as good without the original cast. The other seasons are good, and even introduce some good characters like Lightning and Mike, but the show just feels off because the original point of the show isn't there. That's the reason the first 3 seasons are the best and most well-liked, and why the creators bring back original characters all the time in the newer seasons, because that's all the fans really want. My only other problem with the show is that the loose ends for various characters were never tied up. It feels as though the show left on a cliffhanger at the end of World Tour, but then decided to start a new story in Revenge of the Island. Other than those 2 things, I love this show. That's what I think, very simply, about the official Total Drama TV series. Now on to the not so official Total Drama Reunion. Before hearing about this, although I missed them, I never really thought about the characters getting a real ending. But once I was presented with the idea, I knew that's what I was missing to truly love Total Drama in its entirety. However, after watching the first and only episode of Total Drama Reunion, I was somewhat disappointed. Don't misunderstand. I really appreciate all the hard work and legal risk Blue took to make the fans happy, but frankly, it just wasn't up to snuff with the real thing. And I know. How could you expect a fan made product to hold up to the official TV show? And I didn't. But I was still disappointed because I was shown the idea of my favorite characters getting a real ending, and then it was just okay, and it didn't even get finished. I think the script is mostly well written, and every character says lines that sound very much like something they would say in the real show. The art style is nearly identical to the official Total Drama series, and the concept is great. The whole thing has a much creepier aesthetic, and the storylines seem to be heading in more serious and interesting directions. However, the frame rate is so low, it sometimes feels like you're watching a Prezi. The voice actors are all very talented, but they all come so close to the sound of the original characters' voices without actually reaching them that it sounds like a really good impression, and it's really hard to get that out of your head. Also, the sound recording is off and can often be distracting. Overall, it's a very, very cool concept that took a lot of hard work to make, but just fell too short and ran into too much legal trouble. Oh, wait, also, why Ava? Out of all the characters you could bring back and give an ending to, why her? Oh, I just hate her so much. And she isn't even a favorite of the fan base. Anyway, now for my proposed final season of Total Drama. As I've said plenty of times before, I'll be going off the concept of reunion. Chris has become a psychopath who has kidnapped his old contestants with the goal of putting them through one last season of the show. Some important things to remember before I begin are that the characters are in a much more dangerous situation than they've ever been, meaning they'll be acting at least somewhat different from their normal selves, as would anyone in a life or death scenario. My proposed show will also be somewhat shorter than a real season of Total Drama because they aren't playing a game. Chris is trying to make them play a more deadly version of the game, and they are trying to escape the island. So, Reunion, especially towards the final third of it, began to really remind me of a Dark Pictures game. For those unfamiliar with Dark Pictures, they're horror video games where you make decisions for the characters who usually have to survive a night against some horrific monster or serial killer. In these games, the characters are always somewhere familiar yet foreign, like the campers on the now deserted island, and at the same time have to navigate their personal relationships, like the campers on the now deserted island. I'll also mention Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, possibly the best and most underrated iteration of Scooby-Doo. Though it didn't deliver an ending for the gang in Scoob, it did demonstrate that a kids show can take on much darker tones while still succeeding in staying true to the source material, something this new final season of sorts would try to do. Ultimately, this final season would be a mix between a Dark Pictures game and Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. As I said before, the show starts with Chris kidnapping his old friends and returning them to the island, where once he was just a narcissistic television host obsessed with ratings. Now he's a psychotic semi-escaped prisoner obsessed with getting revenge on the people who put him in jail in the first place. It is unclear whether this is really Chris's motivation or if he's so crazy he doesn't know what he's doing and thinks it's just a renewal of the show. For the contestants, this is not the same game they played 15 years ago. This is a life or death scenario. Early on during the first challenge, whoever is cannon fodder would die, and although they already suspected this was not the same Chris, this now cements that idea, and they have more motivation than ever to get off the island as fast as possible. That's the basic premise of the show, but what about the characters? The cast, besides Chris, will consist mostly of the same characters as proposed by Reunion, being Trent, Gwen, Owen, Courtney, Heather, Alejandro, Duncan, Cody, Lashana, Jeff, and Bridget. And not Ava. Like seriously, why did they choose her? Anyhow, these would be the main characters for the most part. I would also bring back most of the other contestants. Ezekiel, Katie, Sadie, Izzy, Noah, Tyler, Justin, DJ, Harold, Beth, and Lindsay. Oh, okay, I guess you two. and I would not bring back Sierra. Each of the main characters would have an important storyline, and the small, fodderier characters would have little bits, but mostly just be there to die and raise the stakes for the main characters, like they do in the real show. I cannot emphasize this enough. The characters do not die one at a time like in Elimination. Some do, especially at the beginning, but as the show goes on, it becomes more random and non formulaic. It should never be perceived as the same thing as an elimination. The different arcs would go like this. Bridget and Jeff have stayed together since the show and have a family of their own. One of them would unfortunately die pretty immediately, and the other would basically shut down, being a burden to everyone else for the rest of the show. And unlike the real show, where burdens can get voted off, no one wants to leave one of their friends to die. Owen should stay a somewhat comical character. He wouldn't really fully grasp the levity of what's going on. He just misses his friends. He'd be cracking more jokes under stress and less just farting all the time. A possible friendship arc with Noah would be a good combination, now seeing Owen as the smart one protecting the much more frightened Noah. Lashana should go off on her own, away from the group, doing an homage to the total drama good girl turned badass archetype. Cody, like in Redemption, would have become much stronger and seemingly more mature. He'll even try to be the superhero of the group. But as time goes on, we, along with the other characters, realize Cody is a lot more like the old Cody everyone remembers. His arc would be about actually turning into the person he first presented himself to be. Heather and Alejandro would share a lot of screen time together. At first, they would both act very tough and try to lead the group in their own ways, and act as though they didn't like each other. But in actuality, each never wants the other to leave their sight, afraid of what might happen if they aren't there to protect each other. When the two get separated midway through the series, they both freak out in their own ways and can either thrive or crack under pressure. Gwen has always been one of the most main characters of the Total Drama franchise, and this season wouldn't change that. She would start off less of an important part, but gradually grow more and more into a leader. During this time, she also falls back in love with Trent, who has always been in love with her, and when they finally confirm their feelings for each other, she dies doing something heroic. Trent was done dirty by the writers of the show after season 1. He went from being a laid-back, cool guy to being a stressed-out, paranoid boyfriend. As this is canon in the universe of Total Drama, Trent remembers his past, so doesn't push anything with Gwen. But as someone who typically would be cooler-headed in a situation like this, Gwen and Trent spend more and more time with each other, reminding them of their feelings for one another, until Gwen dies. After that, Trent becomes one of the most main characters. Duncan has long moved on from Gwen since he was last seen on Total Drama, but his feelings for Courtney never dissipated. He is someone who goes off on his own as he is the most used to crime and danger, but still keeps a watchful eye over everyone like he does in the series. He's actually very caring. When he sees what happens to Trent and Gwen, this makes him realize he has to always protect Courtney, and he never leaves her side until he dies. She dies, or they get off the island. If she dies, then maybe Duncan kills Chris, ending their rivalry once and for all. Courtney, like in Reunion, is the lawyer responsible for putting Chris in jail, so she puts all of the weight of the situation on herself. If anyone is going to find a way out, it will be her because she started it all. When Duncan starts trying to protect her, she is not happy about it. Firstly, because of how things between her and Duncan have always been, but mostly because she doesn't want anyone to get hurt for her when everyone is in the situation because of her. I don't really know how I'd deal with Chris. Maybe he's killed, like I said, by Duncan or Trent. Maybe he's actually not the one doing this stuff, and there's some other evil entity above him giving him room for redemption. I don't really know. And that's it, guys. I didn't want to write a fan fiction, so there's not really a story here, at least not a middle or an end. The point of making this was just to say, wouldn't it be cool if Fresh TV gave these guys an ending instead of just making new casts? I know they never will, but it's a nice thought. Like I said, this idea definitely isn't perfect, so if you have any different ideas or want to add to mine, throw those down in the comments. Well, that's it. Bye.